Karen handed me a $500 fine for hunting on my own land, said I was violating HOA wildlife safety code and endangering families. Then she called the cops, demanding I be arrested. What she didn't know, I'm the Federal Game Warden for this entire region. Not only was I hunting legally, was on duty. Within a week, her HOA was under federal investigation for trespassing, habitat destruction, and fraud. By the time I was done, Karen was out of power. The HOA was bankrupt from fines, and their fancy nature trail was shut down for good. It was the first cool weekend of fall, the kind of morning where the fog still hung low across the treetops, and dew clung to every blade of grass like nature's own warning sign to tread softly. I'd been up since 4:30 a.m., dressed in camo, boots laced tight, and rifle strapped to my back as I hiked through the thicket that bordered my land and the Ridgewood Meadows subdivision. My family had owned this 180-acre tract for 3 generations. It was forest, creek, hills, and wild game as far as the eye could see. But over the past few years, the HOA-built community on the north edge had begun encroaching on peace and wildlife alike. I had posted signs, bright orange markers reading private property. Federal Land Management coordinated no trespassing, but those signs were treated like decorations by the Karen-led HOA. They'd cleared brush over the boundary, built a nature trail that ran 20 feet into my woods, and even installed cameras on my trees. But the last straw came when I returned from a 2-day wildlife monitoring trip and found a $500 HOA violation ticket taped to my mailbox. The offense: discharging a firearm within HOA jurisdiction. The firearm in question, a bolt-action rifle, I used to call invasive wild boar. The jurisdiction they were claiming, my own federally registered land. At first, I laughed. I figured it was a misunderstanding. That is, until Karen, the self-appointed wildlife safety officer of Ridgewood, came strutting down my driveway in a reflective vest and aviators, holding a clipboard and flanked by 2 clipboard-carrying board members. Mr. Colt, you have been observed hunting too close to a residential zone, she said, crossing her arms like she'd rehearsed in front of a mirror. You're in violation of HOA Code 14B and subject to administrative penalties. Karen, I replied calmly, you're standing on my land. You have no jurisdiction here. And I don't answer to your HOA. She smirked like I was a freshman arguing with a teacher. We extended our wildlife corridor to cover this area. The board voted it's covered under shared ecological easement. Look it up. I wrote the state laws. You're misquoting, I said flatly. I'm the Federal Game Warden for this entire county and for others. Her smirk flickered, but she recovered quickly. No one is above HOA law. Oh really? The next day she called the sheriff. Claimed I was endangering Ridgewood families by illegally hunting near children. The deputy knew me well. He called ahead and said, "Want me to bring coffee?" This sounds like one of those calls. Sure enough, Karen met him at the edge of my driveway yelling about rogue gunmen and public danger. I stepped out with my federal badge in one hand and a signed letter from the Department of Wildlife Management in the other. The deputy nodded. Karen, you can't fine a federal officer for doing his job on his own land. But she wouldn't let up. She accused me of fraudulent impersonation of a government official, demanded I be arrested, and even called a local news crew to expose armed squatters on HOA land. That's when I decided this wasn't going to end with a polite conversation. This was going to end with a lesson. The next week, I filed a formal complaint to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the state's Department of Natural Resources. I included photos of the HOA's unauthorized trail system crossing into protected land, footage of HOA members disturbing wild nests and damaging habitat, and recordings of Karen personally removing no trespassing signs from federal property. The agencies responded quickly and seriously. On Friday morning, 3 black SUVs rolled into the Ridgewood clubhouse parking lot. Agents stepped out with clipboards, field kits, and federal insignia on their shoulders. They weren't here to talk, they were here to audit. Karen's jaw dropped when she saw the team taping off parts of the trail and placing under federal investigation placards. Property lines were resurveyed, GPS tagged, and every square foot of encroachment was documented. Turns out Ridgewood HOA had unknowingly cleared a swath of protected habitat, including the edge of an eagle nesting zone, and had no permits, no environmental compliance, and no legal right to be on the land. But the best part, a month prior, Karen had applied for a recreational expansion grant using my land in the proposal without ever contacting me. The paper trail exposed her to federal grant fraud charges. I watched from my porch, sipping coffee, as agents carted out boxes of documents from the Ridgewood office and towed away the unauthorized camera installations. Karen tried to argue with them, until one agent pulled out a thick envelope and said, "Ms. Henley, you are hereby served with a cease and desist, along with pending federal violations. You are advised to seek counsel." That night, a special meeting was held at the clubhouse. I attended after all. I had been asked by the state to explain the gravity of the violations. I stood at the front of the room wearing my federal badge on my jacket and laid it out plainly. Asterisk, your HOA's actions violated both state and federal conservation law. You trespassed on protected land, endangered wildlife, and interfered with law enforcement operations. You owe $875,000 in fines and counting. Asterisk gasps. One guy fainted. Karen turned white. Then I handed her one last envelope. This is a personal no-contact order. You are not to enter within 300 feet of my land. Violate it, and you'll be answering to federal marshals. Asterisk. The fallout was swift. Karen was removed from her position. The HOA was placed under administrative receivership. The Ridgewood Nature Trail was shut down. The clubhouse funding was frozen, and a restoration crew was hired to replant damaged habitats. HOA dues tripled overnight to cover fines and restitution. Asterisk. As for Karen, she resigned in disgrace and left town shortly after the charges went public. Asterisk. Now I still hunt every fall, but with one new addition: a 12-foot-tall fence and motion cameras lining my side of the property. Not to keep the wildlife in, asterisk, but to keep the Karens out.